I'm really glad to be here. And we've got about 13 slides, so we want to keep it kind of short. So leaky gut syndrome is an increase in the permeability of the intestinal mucosa or the lining, allowing bacteria, toxic digestive metabolites, bacterial toxins, and other molecules to leak into the blood supply. So as I'm talking to patients, I'm kind of saying this is semi-permeable, how these fingers come together. That is semi-permeable. When we have leaky gut syndrome, we have become hyperpermeable. So we are allowing a lot of things through, larger molecules and things that shouldn't be getting through. And those then have the ability to translocate. That's the problem. So medical circles often associate this condition with celiac disease and other systemic inflammation. So I really, truly think that literally everything that we deal with has a constituent or has a component of that leaky gut syndrome. I like the picture of the bucket here. How, how we can patch it, we can actually heal it, not just patch it. We can repair it. We could solder on or weld on and fill that bucket so that we could hold water again. So here's the idea of leaky gut. So here's a healthy gut on the top. The healthy gut, you can see, only allows things through that have the ability to make it through transport chains and things like that. I like that. The microscopic picture on the upper right, if you can look there, you can see how the integrity of that colon or that digestive tract looks versus the picture below. Okay, so we're looking at that healthy gut on the top versus the unhealthy gut on the bottom. And again, that hyperpermeability is the problem. So it all starts in your gut. It is a pandemic in the modern world. Literally, I would say everybody has some effect of leaky gut just because of the amount of antibiotics we have, the amount of food that we eat that's trash. It creates that inability for our guts to be strong and permeable the way that it should be, semi-permeable versus hyperpermeable. So it is the cause of most degenerative diseases. So getting in and knocking out the layers of infection, what I like to do is just think about it and make it be almost my first thing that I look at is making sure that gut is strong by getting rid of the layers of infection. So those layers, of course, Bacto-X, Viro-X, Fungex, Paramac, Microsite, and Meta-X. Those are the main things that I'm going after. And sometimes I'll be doing 2 and 3 of those layers of infection at once. So I use muscle testing and I use a electrodermal screening to determine what is the main priority. And if need be, then I'll also have the patient take a complete digestive stool analysis to see what other things might be there. I then target whatever part. If it's in the colon, I'll target it with Coltrax, or if it's in the upper digestive tract, the stomach and small intestine with Gastrotrax. Of course, using the Vivaprofen to reestablish the good bacteria. Now, the Vivaprofen has, I believe, roughly 10 good bacteria that also have antifungal effect to them as well. So that's a very good, strong reestablishment of good bacteria. And it's also a selling point to why you would want your patients to use the Vivaprofen versus another type of antibiotic, because it's so antifungal in its effect. The Cytosine, of course, is shut down the inflammation in the gut. The Digesta, I'll use the Digesta with meals and then on an empty stomach as well, depending on if we're working on dementia and other things where we want to try to digest things that are in the blood and in the brain. Then I'll have them do the Digesta on an empty stomach to help digest that protein out of their brain. The Toxis, of course, to remove the toxins, and Fortifiber to cleanse and clear the bowel, scrape it, rake it, if you will. So it's basically a 4 or 5 concept idea: removing the offending organisms, and then repairing, getting it to become tight, and then reestablishing the digestive or the good bacteria, and then replacing the digestive enzyme. That's the idea of getting rid of and supporting the digestive or the leaky gut. So it's also a battle between the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. So maintaining a healthy microbiome is vital for the first line of defense against translocation of pathogens. That translocation is where we're getting the original bacteria, virus, fungus, parasite into the system, into the blood supply, that then ultimately can cross the blood-brain barrier and become a problem within the brain. So supporting that good bacteria is just vital. And so you can see the good bacteria is on the left and then the bad bacteria is on the right. Now, the good bacteria do three main things. They create lactoferrin, which is a protein that binds up iron that the bad bacteria use as food. Number two, they create a lactoperoxidase, which is an enzyme that helps break through the walls of the bad bacteria. The good bacteria, that's how they're helping to get rid of the bad bacteria. So viviprofen is very important in supporting it, and one of the main four concepts of repairing leaky gut syndrome. So leaky brain syndrome then is what occurs when the blood-brain barrier fails to keep out unwanted or harmful substances, pathogens, dangerous toxins that can compromise the neurological function. So when it does compromise, when we do get abnormal infections within the brain, now most everybody thinks, well, the brain, that's going to be sterile. Well, the blood's sterile. Well, no, it's not. It's got bacteria in it. It's got parasites in it. Those can cross the blood-brain barrier. Many people and now are discussing this concept of microbiome within the actual brain. So those associated disorders, dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, depression, schizophrenia, and autism. So I'm noticing with myself that I just haven't been as clear, as bright, as on it. And I really think here I am, the guru, if you will, in my own practice about leaky gut syndrome. And now I actually have it. And I'm working on getting rid of those infections and supporting my brain so that I don't end up getting dementia and Alzheimer's and the rest of them. So a major part of this leaky brain syndrome is inflammation. So inflammation is the major cause of dementia disorders. Dementia disorders are the new type 3 diabetes, and I'm sure you've heard of that. The new type 3. Well, wait a minute, type 3, what is that? Well, it's basically the dementias. Because of the inflammation, it's causing so much burning of the vessels, the small arterioles and venules to the brain, that we're not perfusing the blood the way that we should to the brain. The immune system, that second point down, the immune system then fights subclinical infections in the brain, leading to inflammation. Some scientists then suggest that we have a microbiome in the brain as well as the gut, and this microbiome becomes weakened. If it does, the subclinical pathogens create even more inflammation. So that inflammation of the brain, literally patients say to me, my brain feels hot. I feel like I'm inflamed in my brain. And that's exactly what's happening. You're not only shutting down because of the inflammation of the increased amount of sugars that we're eating, but also because of the abnormal life forms within the brain, and the microbiome then breaks down. Okay, so with Alzheimer's now, let's specific more about that. Predispositions to Alzheimer's. The APOE4 is a genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's. So if you have that, you're predisposed for it, doesn't mean that you're going to have it. So, and as we'll learn a little bit later, the epigenetics may help with non-expression of that gene. So in a future slide, we'll discuss more of what epigenetics can actually do to diminish the ability or the possibility for that APOE gene to express. Amyloid plaque in Alzheimer's is an innate immune response. So we have innate immune system and we have the acquired immune system. So the innate immune system is something that we're born with. So this amyloid plaque is like a fibrous grasping tentacle thing that grabs a hold on of dead and dying nerve tissue and also of these abnormal life forms. So let's read that again. Alzheimer's is an innate immune response to subclinical pathogens. Subclinical is the key. That I call that layers of infection. Not enough that you have a major fever, that you've got a headache or, showing signs that you need to get to the emergency room, but subclinical fungus or other pathogens. So so this fibrous string-like structure captures the microbes and dead nerve cells over time. By the time the plaque is discovered, it may have been growing or reacting for years. So think about that. Just they're trying to clean and make sure that there isn't stuff in our brain. That's what the amyloid plaque is created for, or is the effect of. Also, the herpes simplex 1 and Lyme disease, the spirochetes are triggers and are implicated in Alzheimer's. So we want to make sure that we're watching that and making our immune system strong so that they don't get a bigger hold on what's happening. So neurological disorder prevention, what do we do and how do we prevent dementias, disorders, and Alzheimer's? Support of healthy microbiome of the gut and brain. So we've got, again, the Coltrax, Gastrotrax, Vivaprofen, Cytosym, and Digesta. So that's going to be working on the gut and that its hyperpermeability, which allows translocation of those subclinical microbes. When I say microbes, I'm not just talking about bacteria, but fungus, parasite, viruses. So we want to support a healthy microbiome of the gut and the brain. So that's what I'm thinking of is doing the Vivaprofen and the other good bacteria's empty stomach that would allow them to have a better chance of supporting that microbiome. Watch high carb intake. 50% of the population is insulin resistant. And that's just because we're so used to having carbohydrate. I definitely am that guy that's looking for carbohydrate all the time. And most recently, I've tried to do a little bit more keto in my diet, a little bit more good sugar or good oils. And I'm noticing that my mind is clearing up. I'm noticing I have more energy that's sustained, and I'm not looking to go grab it and then my next carbohydrate. So that's been a big thing. We'll talk about that in a moment. So watch your high intake, and then look at the keto diet. I don't know that I'm 100% a ketoite. For sure, I'm not, but I'm leaning more towards that to just have more effective oils in my diet, good proteins, good vegetables, and fruit, but kind of a minimal fruit. But I'm noticing that I'm having that burn. So you say ketosis, burn fat for a slower burn versus jet fuel. So my jet fuel is, I'd go home and eat here in Utah, we have a bread called Grandma Sycamore bread, and it's just white refined yuck muck, but everybody loves it. But I've noticed I go home for lunch and have a sandwich and whatever else, and get back to the office, start my 2 o'clock appointments, and by 3:30, starting to notice a brain glitch as I'm dropping from the carbohydrates. So I really feel like that ketosis and that the keto diet is a great way to go. So again, then watching for pancreas, liver G, and digesta to stabilize that the liver pancreatic access to make sure that we have a better way of digesting or absorbing our sugars. So how to prevent the dementia, again, from Alzheimer's continue. We also then look at taking IntegraCell and ABL to support the messenger RNA and the replication of the RNA and the proteins that the RNA creates. So those are very important. So if you do find that you have an APOE4, don't smoke, drink alcohol, eat diets high in antioxidants, and that's why we do the IntegraCell. And I cannot tell you how much I love IntegraCell, how I've seen such miraculous effect by adding the IntegraCell with my first line defense. My first application generally always has IntegraCell with it. So if I'm working on a large parasite in the gut, I'm always going to look at IntegraCell. It just supports, like throwing a blanket of goodness and support. And I find that my patients catapult with that alone. The next one then, herpes simplex. 95% of the population has it, and keep it in remission because its herpes simplex is also one of the main factors within Alzheimer's. So keep it in remission with healthy immune system. And we're going to do that by thinking about Immunis and Thymusure and ViroX specifically for the herpes. And then intermittent fasting. This is another concept that keto talks about quite often, but eat 1 meal a day. This helps with, it's called autophagy, is the ability for you to clean, or phagy, or to eat the extra proteins, cells that are broken down and so forth. We eat 3 times a day. The concept of intermittent fasting is we don't need to actually eat 3 times a day, they suggest, but spread our meals out possibly to 2 a day or 1 a day. We have plenty of protein. We have plenty of carbohydrates, stored carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in the liver that we can draw from, that we don't have to constantly be eating. It's the amount of proteins that are around that aren't digested well is the idea of the intermittent fasting. So then we get the autophagy to digest those extras. So it cleans out old dead cells and proteins. The body must have time to digest these extras. So I've been starting to do this a little bit as well. And I'm noticing, again, I'm feeling better. I'm able to, as long as I've had good oils for breakfast, I can last clear till dinner with, skipping lunch and have clear brain, clear and lots of energy instead of having that carbohydrate. So the mechanisms that turns genes on and off is the epigenetics. So we talked about that earlier. The epigenetics can support us so that we don't have to manifest those predispositions, those genetic predispositions. So just because you have the gene doesn't mean that it will be expressed. That's what's neat. So how epigenetics then is what's around genetics. So it's basically eating good nutrients. So eat nutrients. So we're talking about IntegraCell, Verdance, Leptera. I use a scoop of IntegraCell and a scoop of Verdance, and the staff will bring that into me about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And again, that's just brings such clarity and energy and focus. So that's part of eating good food. Intermittent fasting, sleep, exercise. Of course, I suggest 20 minutes of cardio every day, and every other day, maybe a minimal resistance. I'm not into bodybuilding myself particularly. There's so much more in my life that makes me lift, makes me, I'm active around the house, things like that. But exercise, mood and thoughts, having a good thought, good ideas, good keeping away from stinking thinking. So when we're thinking about mood and thoughts, Zenadapt, Optimogen, Hypothala, Adrenax, Cetaquil. Our ability to support mood and thought and endocrine system is phenomenal with Inno-Vita, just amazing. And age, as we get older, we tend to start to fall apart. And that's one great thing that Dr. Kim is working on now, is looking at anti-aging, being able to think about maybe reversing some of those and being able to objectify if we are actually reversing biological age. So epigenetics is kind of like genes. Our genes are what would be like a CD that carry information to it. And epigenetics is like the CD player. So as we work on epigenetics, again, that's just what we just covered in the previous slide: eating, sleeping, and drinking, and taking good nutrients. If we're doing those good things, that genes don't have to manifest. That APOE4 doesn't have to say, okay, well, I'm automatically going to have Alzheimer's. So I'm just thinking about, using this epigenetics so we can continue to be strong and not have to fall into that what our genes are showing.